This is the Hannington transmitting station in North Hampshire, England, UK, located on Coddington Hill. This is a Google Maps user-contributed photosphere. I have no idea who this guy is, but it's a very beautiful part of England, as you can see. In November 1977, a deeply stupid thing happened here involving this TV transmitter and supposedly an alien called Vrillon. It's actually a pretty interesting historical mystery. Earlier in 1977, in Ohio, something else happened that was not stupid at all, and which is even more interesting. The famous wow signal, wow with an exclamation point. Scientists aren't sure what it really was. There's been a lot of speculation about what it could have been, which is a message from an alien civilization. Was it really? Well, in this video, we'll examine the case. Did aliens contact us in 1977? I'm Sean Munger, I'm a historian, and I teach history classes online. You can see what I've got on my website, seanmunger.com. Click My Courses, and you'll see what I'm offering. Right now, I've got a course on the Vietnam War, another one on understanding Vladimir Putin, and a free course on the Pearl Harbor attack. I also give free webinars on various historical topics. 43 years ago this week, at 5:10 in the evening of Saturday, November 26, 1977, viewers of the UK station Southern Television saw and heard a very strange thing. In the middle of a news broadcast about the war in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, the audio cut out and a mysterious booming metallic voice came over the airwaves, claiming to be the voice of Vrillon. Vrillon stated that he was an extraterrestrial from the Ashtar Galactic Command, and that the people of Earth were entering a new age of Aquarius. This new age would be a time of peace, but only if Earthlings gave up their evil weapons and made nice. While viewers heard the voice of Vrillon, they continued to see the normal Southern Television broadcast, followed by a Looney Tunes cartoon. After droning on for about 6 minutes with some New Age nonsense, Vrillon said that he was leaving your plane of existence, and the strange transmission ended. A few hours later, Southern Television apologized on air for the incident. This bizarre incident is an example of a broadcast signal intrusion, where a hacker gains temporary control of a broadcast frequency. The Vrillon incident was the UK's most prominent occurrence of this rare phenomenon, but it happened again in the United States, in Chicago, almost 10 years to the day later. The Max Headroom broadcast signal intrusion, which I also did a video about. This is pretty difficult to do and takes a lot of technical prowess, but it's not impossible. In the Vrillon case, the intrusion was probably accomplished by someone setting up a low-powered transmitter very near Southern Television's transmitter in North Hampshire, the TV tower I showed you on Google Maps just a minute ago. Beaming the Vrillon signal to Southern's transmitter caused the Vrillon audio to be hugely amplified and sent out over the airwaves to anyone who could tune in to Southern TV's channel. Like the Max Headroom incident of 1987, the identity of Vrillon, or whoever helped him get on the air, was never determined. Despite the technical knowledge needed to do something like this, it's easy for video hijackers to get away with it. Then again, these incidents don't happen very often. There's only a couple of recorded cases of signal intrusion that reached any significant audience. Despite the explanations from Southern Television and the rather straightforward technical understanding of what happened, there were those in 1977 who, perhaps predictably, believed that the Vrillon signal was absolutely genuine, that there really is an Ashtar Galactic Command up there, and that they were warning Earth that night. The Age of Aquarius mythology that began the New Age movement was really ramping up in the late 70s, and there were then, as there are today, numerous people eager to believe in contact from benevolent extraterrestrials. In fact, here on YouTube today, you can find numerous videos recounting the Vrillon incident as if it was literal proof of contact from aliens, instead of a hoax by someone with a perverse sense of humor and a penchant for broadcast engineering. We can file away the Vrillon incident as merely an amusing anomaly, a hoax, but it turns out that something else happened that same year, 1977, that was much less in the LOL category and more in the WOW category. On August 15, 1977, about 10:15 p.m. local time, the radio observatory known as the Big Ear located at Perkins Observatory at Ohio Wesleyan University, detected a very strange radio signal coming from the region of the constellation Sagittarius. The Big Ear was engaged in a project called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Various radio telescopes had been periodically scanning the skies for possible alien broadcasts since 1963. Noted astronomer Carl Sagan was involved in the broader scope project, although he was not present at the detection at the Big Ear. Exactly what the signal was is hard to determine. It was not, strictly speaking, a message in the sense of an intentional, deliberate communication, take me to your leader or anything else like that. And it sure as hell wasn't from Vrillon or the Ashtar Galactic Command. The radio telescope was scanning the frequency 1420 megahertz, which is the frequency at which hydrogen, the most abundant substance in the universe, gives off a faint background radio wave. That night, the Big Ear telescope recorded a highly unusual radio wave whose intensity varied over time, 72 seconds to be precise. Exactly how much the signal's intensity varied on the scale that the scientists were using to measure intensity resulted in sort of a code: 6 Echo Quebec Uniform Juliet 5. Now, mind you, this scale just measures specific ranges of radio wave intensity on a scale that was being used. It's not, in and of itself, a message. A professor who worked at the observatory, Jerry Amen, saw this in a printout of data that came out of the computer recording what the radio telescope had been receiving. Notably, he did not make his discovery in real time. He read the printouts a couple of days later. The telescope was operating on automatic at the time it received the signal. Because most of what the radio telescope heard and always hears is just background noise with a pretty uniform low intensity, the printout usually looks like a sea of random 1s, 2s, and 3s. A more powerful radio wave, much more powerful than what you might call background radiation, looks very different. On the paper, Amen circled the anomaly, the code 6EQJ5, and wrote "wow!" exclamation point next to it in red ink. This gave the transmission its name, the WOW signal. I'm not a scientist, and my understanding of radio astronomy is pretty rudimentary. Therefore, let me read you the words of an astronomer, Dr. John Krause, who was the director of the Perkins Observatory. This is a letter, a summary of the WOW signal incident that he wrote to Carl Sagan in 1994. So let me read you his words. A link to the source is in the description of this video, and then we'll unpack this. Quote, "The signal frequency of 1420.3556 megahertz was inside the internationally protected 1400 to 1427 megahertz band reserved for HI observations in which all emissions are prohibited. The signal was strong. It was detected for over 1.5 minutes as it passed through the beam of the radio telescope. The source was moving at the sidereal rate from east to west. To match this pattern, an Earth satellite would need to be at translunar distances of millions of kilometers. With help from NASA, the positions of all the known space probes were found to be far from the signal direction. In any case, a probe seems unlikely, since an active one should have been reobserved near the same coordinates." End quote. So, first point, the frequency. A certain portion of bandwidth is reserved by international treaty for the use of radio astronomy. In other words, radio stations here on Earth aren't supposed to be broadcasting in this channel. And it's near the frequency that scientists believe is the most likely to be the frequency on which intelligent civilizations would send messages, if there are any out there doing that. Second point, Dr. Krause and his team checked the possibility that the signal was coming from Earth-orbiting satellites, and it seems unlikely. In other words, wherever it was coming from, it probably wasn't local. One interesting point about the WOW signal, which confused me when I started looking into this, is that the transmission was apparently, or possibly, unmodulated. Modulation is how we, human beings, typically communicate via radio waves. There's two kinds of radio that we use, frequency modulation and amplitude modulation, AM and FM. The WOW signal was an anomaly in intensity, but the Big Ear did not record modulation, meaning there wasn't a message there in the same way that there's a message on an FM or AM radio channel. I will put in the description to this video a link to a paper by Jerry Ayman, the man who discovered the signal, in 1997 on the 20th anniversary of the discovery that contains some discussion of this modulation issue. Basically, to make a long story short, he says that although the radio telescope did not detect modulation, it doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't there. The signal might have been modulating on a very, very narrow bandwidth that the radio telescope was not equipped to detect. So, to summarize, the signal might have been modulating in a way that the radio telescope couldn't hear. We just don't know. So there might indeed have been a message there. The wow signal is so tantalizing in part because it's never been heard again. And naturally, the guys at the big ear started listening intently to that part of the sky on that frequency. Many others have done that too. In the 43 years since the detection of the signal, numerous attempts have been made to pick it up again. As of November 2020, no dice. So the big question, was this a message from an extraterrestrial intelligence? Let me quote John Krause from that 1994 letter again. Quote, "The wow signal is highly suggestive of extraterrestrial intelligent origin, but little more can be said until it returns for further study." End quote. Jerry Ayman went even farther. In that 1997 paper, he wrote, quote, "Thus, since all the possibilities of a terrestrial origin have either been ruled out or seem improbable, and since the possibility of an extraterrestrial origin has not been able to be ruled out, I must conclude that an ETI, extraterrestrial intelligence, might have sent the signal that we received as the wow source. Of course, being a scientist, I await the reception of additional signals like the wow source that are able to be received and analyzed by many observatories. Thus, I must state that the origin of the wow signal is still an open question for me. There is simply too little data to draw many conclusions. In other words, as I stated above, I choose not to draw vast conclusions from half-vast data." End quote. If you've been with my channel for a while, you probably know that I'm a highly skeptical person, and I don't jump to conclusions lightly. Oak Island treasure, nonsense. George Adamski's vacuum cleaner UFO, complete fabrication. Ancient aliens, racist propaganda. Faked photo supposedly of Mozart's wife, sorry, it ain't her. Mark Hamill's face, tempest in a teapot. The Vrillon thing, the Hannington signal intrusion, of course, is garbage. Some clever person playing with a radio. Vrillon is from North Hampshire, not the Pleiades. The wow signal, though, I think there's something there. When even the scientists, the experts who are trained in this field and have examined this data carefully for more than 40 years now, when even they tell us that they can't rule out the significant possibility that this is an alien transmission of some kind, I think we have to consider this as a possible explanation. We can't come to a conclusion because there's not enough data, but we also can't rule it out. So, did aliens contact us in 1977? Maybe they did. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff that you normally do for videos that you like, and check out my website at seanmunger.com. Thanks a lot.